What if you locked 100 Brits and 100 Americans in a massive room, no weapons, no rules, just fists, adrenaline, and accents? That's the question that exploded across TikTok and set the internet on fire. One simple, absurd idea sparked a viral debate with millions weighing in, turning casual scrolling into national pride contests and meme wars. And no, it's not just a joke anymore. It's a cultural clash wrapped in humor, patriotism, and a surprising amount of analysis. It all started with a TikTok from @tombwad_, a creator known for asking offbeat questions that turn into internet obsessions. The video was barely a minute long, but the premise was irresistible: 100 British people versus 100 Americans in a fight. Who would win? No weapons, no backstory, just raw chaos. Within hours, comment sections were overflowing. Thousands of replies, duets, stitches, and re-uploads later, the internet had officially chosen its new obsession. As the video spread across platforms like Twitter, now rebranded as X, and Instagram, things only got weirder. Some argued strategy. Others argued strength. And many more turned the whole thing into a comedic showdown of national stereotypes. On one side, Americans invoked Waffle House warriors, Florida men, and blue-collar chaos. On the other, Brits fired back with sarcastic wit, council estate veterans, and the unshakable terror of a mum in a dressing gown yelling across the street. Memes flew faster than punches ever would. But beyond the laughs and satire, there's something deeper fueling this viral moment. The reason it spread like wildfire is simple: it taps into something timeless. Cultural rivalry. Shared history. The subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, tension between two nations that are part siblings, part frenemies. British versus American culture has always fascinated people, whether it's about accents, humor, or football versus soccer. And when you reduce that down to a ridiculous fight scenario, it becomes both hilarious and oddly symbolic. People aren't just commenting because it's funny. They're choosing sides because, deep down, they want to believe their country would come out on top, even in the most bizarre hypothetical cage match imaginable. It's a battle of flags, pride, and identity, disguised as a TikTok trend. And so the internet continues to debate. Who wins? 100 Brits or 100 Americans? That's what we're here to explore. Not just who punches harder, but who stands taller in the ultimate no-holds-barred, culturally charged showdown of the century. Stay tuned, because things are about to get seriously entertaining. Brits versus Americans, the stereotypes we love to believe. When the internet took sides in the 100 Brits vs 100 Americans debate, it didn't just ignite a fictional fight, it unleashed a tidal wave of stereotypes. And honestly, that's where most of the fun lies. This wasn't about who had better training or who'd throw the first punch. No, this was about personalities, quirks, and decades of cultural clichés battling it out in people's imaginations. Let's talk Americans. In the online ring, they come in swinging with chaotic energy, shouting battle cries like "freedom" and "yeehaw," while charging into hypothetical combat with zero hesitation. The stereotype paints them as loud, confident, a little unpredictable, and fiercely patriotic. These are people who grow up watching wrestling, idolizing action heroes, and eating food that comes in gallon sizes. They're proud of their flag, their football, no, not the one with the black and white ball, and yes, their right to bear arms, even though this fight doesn't allow any weapons. Now enter the Brits. At first glance, they seem more reserved, even polite. But dig a little deeper, and you'll uncover a kind of quiet rage brewing beneath that stiff upper lip. This is a country powered by sarcasm, fueled by endless cups of tea, and hardened by years of rainy mornings and unreliable public transport. British toughness isn't about muscle. It's about endurance. They don't scream in your face, they mumble an insult that takes you 3 days to understand. But once you do, you're emotionally wrecked. That's a weapon in its own right. These stereotypes didn't come out of nowhere. They've been shaped by everything from Hollywood blockbusters to viral UK street interviews. Americans have long been portrayed as brash and bold, often louder than necessary but always ready to take action. It's the cowboy legacy. The go big or go home attitude. Meanwhile, the British image has been sculpted by pub culture, dry humor, and an almost heroic level of passive aggression. You're more likely to see a Brit roll their eyes than raise their fists, but that doesn't mean they can't throw down when pushed. So, who has the edge if we're going off personality traits alone? At first glance, the Americans might seem like the obvious favorite. They come with bravado, size, and a flair for the dramatic. They don't just fight. They make it a spectacle. But Brits play the long game. They're scrappy, unpredictable, and low-key dangerous, especially when you underestimate them. While an American might run into battle with a scream, a Brit might calmly walk in, say something sarcastic, and then punch you while you're still laughing. This is where the internet's creativity truly shines. One TikTok comment joked that 100 Americans equals 50 gym bros, 30 Florida men, and 20 Waffle House employees. If you don't know about Waffle House, just know it's the only place in the US where the menu includes scrambled eggs and impromptu street fights. On the British side, people talked about the raw power of a council estate lad with nothing to lose, wearing a tracksuit and wielding decades of quiet rage. It's the roadman versus the redneck. It's sarcasm versus swagger. The battle of stereotypes even inspired parody draft picks. Americans boasted about having New Yorkers with short tempers, Texans who can wrestle alligators, and Midwest moms who've lifted entire SUVs to save a child. The Brits countered with seasoned nightclub bouncers, chippy shop owners who've seen it all, and that one guy named Gary from Manchester who's been in 17 pub fights and walked away from each without spilling his pint. Some comparisons are just too good to ignore. The infamous Florida Man meme, based on real headlines like Florida Man tries to fight hurricane or Florida Man arrested while trying to ride a manatee, has become the American trump card. But Britain's answer is just as formidable. The British roadman, often seen pacing outside corner shops in the dead of winter in shorts and sliders, speaks in a language only 5 people understand and radiates the kind of unpredictability that could turn the tide of any fight. So really, when we look at these stereotypes, not as insults, but as caricatures drawn from truth, both sides bring something hilarious and surprisingly powerful to the table. Americans bring the fire. Brits bring the freeze. One side starts fights. The other finishes them quietly and denies it ever happened. And that's what makes this debate so addictive. It's not just about fists, it's about identity. It's about how we see ourselves, how others see us, and how all those perceptions come crashing together in one glorious, hypothetical showdown. Now that we've sized up the personalities, it's time to get into the gritty details. If this was a real fight, no memes, no jokes, what would actually go down? If it's a real fight, let's break it down. So let's stop playing and get serious for a moment. If this imaginary battle between 100 Brits and 100 Americans actually happened, how would it play out? No memes, no stereotypes, just a giant, enclosed space, 100 people from each side, and nothing but their fists, feet, and whatever attitude they brought with them. No weapons. No timeouts. Just 100 versus 100, face to face, ready to find out who walks out standing. First, let's establish the basics. This isn't a boxing ring or a UFC octagon. It's a neutral space. Maybe an aircraft hangar or a stadium with all the seats stripped out. Everyone gets dropped in at once. No team uniforms. No prep time. Just a chaotic burst of instincts, reactions, and raw willpower. And for argument's sake, let's assume each group is made up of average, randomly selected citizens. No pro fighters. No special ops. Just people pulled from the general population, equal in number, equal in starting conditions. Now, let's talk physical stats. On average, American men tend to be slightly taller and heavier than their British counterparts. Recent global health data shows the average American male stands around 5'9" to 5'10" and weighs approximately 200 pounds. Brits come in just a little shorter and lighter, averaging about 5'9" and 185 pounds. It's not a huge difference, but in a brawl, that extra mass could mean more force behind a punch, or more weight to carry if endurance becomes an issue. But weight and height are just the start. What about fitness? The United States, for all its gym culture, isn't exactly winning gold when it comes to national health. Obesity rates in the US hover near 40%, while the UK sits closer to 28%. Both countries struggle with sedentary lifestyles, but Americans do have one distinct edge: gym obsession. From CrossFit to powerlifting to military-style boot camps, Americans love structured physical training. If our imaginary fighters come from urban centers and suburbs, chances are many of the Americans spend more time pumping iron than their British counterparts. But don't count out the Brits just yet. Where America has gym rats, Britain has street smarts. Scrappiness. The kind of toughness that isn't trained but earned in late-night scuffles and years of navigating tight city corners. While an American might have the bench press numbers, a Brit might have the stamina and grit to outlast a bigger, slower opponent. And when it comes to real fights, heart and instinct often matter more than stats on paper. This brings us to combat sports representation. In MMA and UFC, both countries have produced serious contenders. America has a deep roster of champions: John Jones, Daniel Cormier, Dustin Poirier. Wrestling is deeply ingrained in the American high school and college system. It's a national sport, breeding ground for future fighters. Britain, on the other hand, gave the UFC its first international champion in Michael Bisping, and continues to turn out world-class boxers like Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. Speaking of Fury, let's compare icons. Mike Tyson, the embodiment of American power, speed, and ferocity. A man who trained like a machine and destroyed opponents with one punch. Then there's Tyson Fury, the Gypsy King, unpredictable, unorthodox, and resilient beyond belief. If Mike Tyson is a human cannonball, Tyson Fury is a tactical storm. So who better represents their side? Tyson's explosive aggression feels very American, fast, overwhelming, and intimidating. Fury represents something quintessentially British. He's scrappy, awkward, enduring, and always underestimated until it's too late. In a long fight, Fury wins by staying standing when others have dropped. And maybe that's the metaphor here. Americans have the edge when it comes to size, training, and combat culture. They come in strong, confident, and often trained for confrontation. Whether it's military experience, nearly 7% of Americans have served, compared to just around 4% in the UK, or access to martial arts schools, Americans generally have more exposure to structured physical combat. But Brits often fight dirty. Not dishonestly, just unpredictably. The kind of fight where knees, elbows, headbutts, and timing matter more than form. So, who wins in a raw fight? It's not an easy call. Americans would likely dominate in the opening minutes, overwhelming with strength and aggression. But if the Brits survive the first wave, if they hold their ground long enough for fatigue to set in, they might just turn the tide with endurance, coordination, and controlled retaliation. It's brains versus brawn, instinct versus intensity, experience versus energy. This hypothetical fight isn't just a numbers game, it's a clash of cultures, shaped by different ways of life. One side trains in gyms, the other trains in pubs and on playgrounds. One side learns through sports, the other through survival. And in this imaginary war room, that contrast is exactly what keeps the outcome uncertain, and the internet obsessed. Mentality and tactics, it's not just muscle. In any fight, what's going on in the mind is just as important as what's happening with the fists. It's not always the strongest who win, it's the ones who know how to survive, think on their feet, and adapt when everything falls apart. And when it comes to 100 Brits vs 100 Americans, the real difference might not be their biceps, but their mindset. There's a reason why the phrase, "go big or go home," is practically stitched into the American DNA. Americans are raised on ambition, boldness, and the belief that confidence can carry you through just about anything. That energy shows up in sports, business, and yes, even in a hypothetical brawl. When faced with a challenge, the American instinct is to charge, overwhelm, and dominate. It's fast. It's aggressive. It's built on the idea that hesitation equals defeat. The British approach couldn't be more different. Think of the phrase, "keep calm and carry on," but then imagine someone calmly carrying on while simultaneously kicking you in the shin. British mentality thrives on endurance, subtlety, and dry humor under pressure. They're not charging in guns blazing. They're holding the line, watching, waiting, and then, when you least expect it, hitting you where it hurts, usually with a perfectly timed insult or a swift jab to the side of the head. So who has the better instincts when it comes to national defense or group strategy? The American response is usually loud, fast, and overwhelming. Think of protest responses, crowd control, or even sports rallies. Americans are more likely to form structured units, assign roles quickly, and attempt to lead through hierarchy. That might come from military culture, school sports teams, or just the way the society operates, decisively, top-down, and with a big splash. In a fight scenario, that could mean the Americans quickly identify an alpha leader and follow a basic plan, even in the middle of chaos. But the Brits, well, they don't always need a plan. They respond with improvisation and low-level coordination. A few shared glances and muttered instructions can be all they need to synchronize an attack. Their strategy is less formal, more instinctual. 1 minute they're scattered. The next, 3 of them have surrounded someone and are shouting in overlapping accents. It's disorienting. And effective. Now bring history into it, and you start to see where these mentalities come from. Americans have built a national identity on grit and firepower, forged through wars like Vietnam, Korea, and more recently, post-9/11 conflicts in the Middle East. The modern American soldier and citizen alike are drilled on standing tall and fighting back, even when outnumbered or overwhelmed. It's bravery, yes, but also adrenaline and a sense of moral mission. It's about winning, and winning loudly. Meanwhile, Britain's memory stretches back to air raids over London, blackout curtains, and enduring the long haul of World War II with nothing but tea and an iron will. That experience bred a different kind of strength, quiet, stubborn, and almost passive-aggressive in its refusal to quit. The British don't explode, they absorb, survive, and wait for their moment. It's the long game. It's chess, not checkers. So who handles chaos better? Americans thrive in short bursts. They organize quickly and respond with force, but they can burn out fast if things don't go according to plan. Brits, on the other hand, are built for chaos. Years of living in cities where trains are late, the weather is miserable, and the government changes every 5 minutes has made them experts in unpredictable environments. They don't panic, they adjust. And in a chaotic, 100-on-100 melee, that might just be the key to survival. Real-world examples back this up in the most unexpected places. In sports, Americans dominate in high-energy, explosive formats, think basketball and American football, while Brits excel in long-form games like cricket and football, where endurance, patience, and strategy shine. When bar fights break out in America, it's often loud and dramatic. In the UK, it can be quieter, messier, and somehow more personal. Even protest culture reflects the divide. Americans shout slogans and hold signs, Brits show up in suits, hold teacups, and deliver brutal chants with surgical sarcasm. So if mentality shapes the outcome, this battle could go either way. The Americans have explosive power and the drive to lead. But the Brits have adaptability, timing, and a level of passive aggression that borders on psychological warfare. In the end, the winner won't just be the one who hits the hard. What would actually happen in that room? A play-by-play simulation. The room is silent. 100 Brits line up on one side. 100 Americans on the other. The floor beneath them is bare concrete, cold and uninviting, lit by buzzing overhead lights that cast long, twitching shadows. There are no weapons. No rules. Just tension, and the unspoken knowledge that something historic is about to go down. This is it. The moment the internet couldn't stop debating, 100 Brits vs 100 Americans in one giant, chaotic, real-life brawl. At first, no one moves. Both sides size each other up, shifting weight from foot to foot, mentally calculating who looks weakest, who might snap first, and who's secretly been waiting their whole life for this exact moment. A guy in a Red Sox hoodie cracks his knuckles. A bloke from Birmingham sips the last of his tea from a chipped mug he smuggled in and sets it down gently, like a man preparing for war. Then it happens. The first punch. An American in a tank top shouts something incomprehensible about freedom and leaps forward. His target, a tall Brit wearing a football jersey and a look of pure irritation. The punch lands, but not cleanly. It glances off the side of the Brit's jaw, more of a slap than a strike. The Brit stares for half a second, unimpressed, then retaliates with a brutal headbutt that echoes across the room. That's the spark. Chaos erupts. From the American side, strategy emerges quickly. Someone screams, "Form the circle," and instantly, the Americans close ranks. It's like a football huddle gone rogue. There's energy, adrenaline, and a kind of messy, improvised order. They're yelling plays like they're in the Super Bowl. Meanwhile, the Brits do something different. Smaller clusters form, each acting like a rogue pub squad. No leader. no coordination. But everyone knows what to do. They spread out and flow around the chaos like smoke, unpredictable and relentless. Someone lobs a teabag across the room like a grenade. It hits an American in the eye. He screams, not in pain, but confusion. A Yorkshireman swings a belt like a lasso. A guy in a Union Jack tracksuit dropkicks someone while shouting, "For the Queen," even though she's no longer the monarch. Confused or not, it's working. On the American side, someone starts chanting, "USA! USA," and the energy skyrockets. They form a hype circle, like they're back in high school football warm-ups. One guy's doing push-ups mid-brawl. Another's performing a wrestling suplex that definitely wasn't allowed in P. You'd think the structure would help, but the uniformity makes them a target. The Brits pick off the edges, ducking in, landing quick shots, then slipping back out. It's controlled chaos, and they're thriving. Then comes the betrayal. One of the Brits, a guy in a London hoodie, turns mid-fight and clocks another Brit in the jaw. Gasps all around. Was it confusion? Personal beef? Or just a reminder that the British are no strangers to internal conflict? Meanwhile, across the room, an American slips away from the main pack and takes on 3 Brits solo. He's built like a linebacker and moves like a freight train. He knocks 2 down in seconds. But then, enter the quiet guy from Yorkshire. Nobody noticed him until now. He's average height, skinny, wearing a faded Leeds United shirt. But there's a glint in his eye. He walks up to the linebacker like he's ordering a pint, mutters something inaudible, then delivers a single, stunning uppercut that drops the American like a sack of bricks. Even the Americans pause. That was unexpected. Around the room, strange alliances start forming. 1 Brit and 1 American, both bleeding and too tired to swing, lean on each other in a moment of mutual respect. Somewhere near the back, someone starts singing "Sweet Caroline," and, somehow, both sides join in. It's surreal. It's cinematic. It's very nearly peaceful, until someone throws a shoe and it all kicks off again. By the 40-minute mark, the room looks like a battlefield. Bodies everywhere, most still conscious but too bruised to stand. Dust in the air. The smell of sweat, regret, and fast food. It's down to just 5 people still fighting. 3 Brits. 2 Americans. On one side, there's a Londoner with a broken nose and a mouth full of sarcasm, a Scottish guy yelling insults in an accent thick enough to be classified as a separate language, and the quiet Yorkshireman, still standing tall, his shirt now torn but his eyes sharper than ever. Facing him are 2 Americans. One's from Texas, tall, broad, and swinging like he's still in a bar brawl. The other's from New Jersey, smaller, wiry, full of nervous energy, still talking smack even with a busted lip. They circle each other like wolves. No one makes the first move. Then, almost at the same time, they charge. The Texan goes for the Londoner. The Scottish guy takes on Jersey. And the Yorkshireman. He just watches, calculating. Waiting. It's a blur of fists, knees, feints, and dodges. There's no music. No slow motion. Just raw instinct. And then silence. Dust settles. The lights flicker overhead. 3 figures remain standing, but it's hard to tell who's won. One Brit leans against the wall, holding his side. One American is still upright, defiant but breathing hard. And in the center stands the Yorkshireman. Calm. Silent. Unbeaten. He looks at both of them. Smiles. Then drops to one knee, not in surrender, but because, frankly, he's just exhausted. No one says a word. Because in the end, the fight didn't give us a winner. It gave us a story. A ridiculous, glorious, international tale of chaos, pride, and bruised egos. And maybe, just maybe, that's the best outcome we could have hoped for. Culture clash, what this debate really says about it. At first glance, the question of who would win in a fight, 100 Brits or 100 Americans, feels like pure comedy. It sounds like the kind of hypothetical you'd throw into a group chat just to stir up chaos. But the reason it exploded into a global trend and a TikTok-fueled cultural phenomenon runs deeper than just jokes and memes. This debate is funny, yes, but it also holds up a mirror to something far more revealing: how we see ourselves, and how we compare ourselves to each other. People aren't just engaging with this question because they care who'd win a brawl in a stadium. They're invested because it taps directly into their sense of national identity. It's playful patriotism with an edge. For Americans, it's a chance to flex cultural bravado, military pride, physical dominance, and that unshakable belief that they're always ready to win. For Brits, it's an opportunity to showcase their scrappy humor, sarcastic toughness, and the quiet confidence that they've been through worse, and probably had a cup of tea afterwards. This fight, imagined or not, quickly became a symbolic battleground for cultural pride. It's not about violence, it's about validation. Who's more clever? Who's tougher? Who would last longer when everything gets unpredictable? And in a world where so much of our identity plays out online, a debate like this becomes the perfect outlet for showing your colors without picking up an actual flag. TikTok played a massive role in this evolution. It wasn't just the birthplace of the debate, it became the arena. The comment sections, duets, and stitches transformed a single question into a rolling, international comedy sketch. Americans posted videos arguing their side with skits featuring Waffle House waitresses and pro wrestlers. Brits replied with clips of angry mums in slippers, lads from council estates, and drunken pub philosophers breaking down hypothetical battle tactics with a pint in hand. But beyond the banter, something fascinating happened. A kind of cultural exchange began. People from both sides started learning about the other, not through textbooks or documentaries, but through jokes. They discovered just how bizarre and hilarious the other side could be. And that's the strange magic of internet culture. Memes can become maps. They chart the weirdness of our lives, our habits, and our national quirks. And once you start laughing at someone else's world, you're halfway to understanding it. Take the small things that came up in the debate. Chips, for example. A Brit says chips and means thick, salty fries wrapped in newspaper. An American says chips and means the thin, crunchy kind you eat with dip. Somewhere in the middle of this debate, people realized half the fight might be over definitions. If someone yells, "Grab the chips," is it ammunition or a snack break? And then there's sarcasm. For Brits, it's a second language. Entire conversations can be layered in dry wit and double meaning. Americans, for the most part, are more direct. So when a Brit says, "Oh, great, that's just brilliant," an American might take it at face value, not realizing it was actually a verbal eye roll. These differences became part of the joke, but also part of the charm. The fight turned into a cultural masterclass disguised as a meme war. What this tells us is that the internet has changed how we explore national identity. We don't just celebrate it, we challenge it, roast it, remix it, and throw it into fictional battles for the world to watch. And it's not just Brits and Americans doing this. The whole world joins in. Australians, Canadians, Irish, even folks from non-English speaking countries chime in with their own takes, accents, and references. Suddenly, the 100 Brits vs 100 Americans debate becomes something more universal, a celebration of how absurd, funny, and fascinating our differences really are. And perhaps that's why this debate has stuck. Because underneath the punches and teabags, under the chants and bravado, this is really about connection. About how even the most ridiculous hypothetical can reveal what we value, what we find funny, and how we relate to the world around us. It's a reminder that we can laugh at ourselves, throw playful shade at others, and still come away a little more connected than we were before. So yes, the debate is silly. But it's also kind of brilliant. Because whether you're shouting, USA, or muttering, for the Queen, through a bruised lip, you're part of something global. And that, in itself, might be the real win. Unexpected metrics, let's get weird with the data. At this point, we've debated strength, tactics, and mentality. But when it comes to settling the great question of who would win, 100 Brits or 100 Americans, maybe the answer lies not in muscle, but in the numbers. Not the usual statistics, though. We're not talking GDP or military spending. We're going weird. Because sometimes, the quirkiest metrics reveal the most about a nation's fighting spirit. Let's start with caffeine. If this hypothetical brawl drags on for hours, who stays awake the longest? Americans consume an average of 400 milligrams of caffeine a day, mostly through industrial-sized coffee cups, energy drinks, and enough iced lattes to power a city block. Brits drink less coffee but balance it out with an obsession for tea. An average Brit consumes nearly 100,000 cups of tea in their lifetime. That's not just a beverage. That's a lifestyle. And it raises an interesting question. Do Americans win with wired-up, fast twitch energy, or do Brits maintain calm with their steady stream of Earl Grey and passive aggression? One side shakes. The other simmers. Now consider fast food. The US leads the world in fast food consumption. It's fast, it's massive, and it's everywhere. McDonald's, Taco Bell, Chick-fil-A, they're not just restaurants, they're cultural landmarks. The average American eats fast food 3 to 4 times a week. It's a diet built for speed and bulk. Brits aren't far behind. They've got Greggs, Chippies, kebab vans, and late-night mystery meat that tastes suspiciously delicious after a pint. While Americans might bulk up on calories and protein, the Brits have trained their digestive systems to survive anything. If this fight went on long enough to require rations, it might be the Brit with a Tesco meal deal who lasts the longest. Of course, no culture comparison would be complete without addressing one of the oldest internet jokes in the book, British teeth. It's a myth that just won't die, but let's face the data. According to global dental health studies, Brits actually have fewer missing teeth per capita than Americans. They also report slightly better oral hygiene habits. The difference? Americans lean heavily into cosmetic dentistry, whitening, straightening, perfect veneers. Brits are more functional. Teeth are for chewing, not for selfies. So in a headbutt-heavy brawl, who has the dental durability? Maybe the guy with imperfect alignment but fewer fillings walks away smiling. Then there's the matter of public brawling experience. While exact statistics on pub fights are hard to come by, because, let's be honest, they're rarely reported, the cultural image is clear. Britain has a long-standing reputation for turning nights out into unexpected boxing matches. From Glasgow to Liverpool, stories of spontaneous pub brawls are part of local legend. Americans, meanwhile, are more likely to see fights happen in places like dive bars, frat parties, or late-night Denny's diners. But the difference is in frequency and attitude. In Britain, a quick scuffle might end with a pint and a handshake. In the US, it might end with someone being tackled through a jukebox. Call it a tie. Different venues. Same chaos. And now we enter the arena of entertainment. What people watch says a lot about what they value in conflict. In the UK, Love Island is a cultural juggernaut. Beautiful people arguing over who likes whom while sunbathing and swapping partners. It's not a fight, it's psychological warfare in swimwear. Across the Atlantic, Americans are tuning into WrestleMania, where grown adults body slam each other in spandex while shouting into microphones. Both shows are bizarrely intense. One is emotional manipulation disguised as romance. The other is staged violence with a cult following. If these were Olympic events, Love Island wins gold in mind games, while WrestleMania takes silver in sheer spectacle. So if we did create an actual Olympic event based on this hypothetical battle, what would the categories be? Caffeine endurance. Fast food durability. Pub combat technique. Dental damage resistance. Reality TV psychological warfare. And just for fun, an accent challenge where each side has to understand the other without subtitles. It would be messy, unpredictable, and probably the most watched event in history. And who would win gold? It's hard to say. America brings the fire, the flash, and the protein shakes. Britain brings the grit, the sarcasm, and digestive resilience. In the end, both sides win something. America wins the title for raw power and enthusiasm. Britain wins for tactical endurance and unexpected cunning. It's not a clear victory, it's a cultural deadlock. But one thing is obvious, both nations are absolutely prepared for the weirdest Olympics you've ever seen. So, who wins? And does it even matter? After all the punches, memes, teabags, and chants of freedom, the question still hangs in the air like the last swing in a bar fight. Who actually wins? In a literal sense, maybe no one. In a metaphorical sense, well, that depends on what you value more. Brute force or clever timing, raw energy or scrappy resilience, a knockout punch or a perfectly timed comeback. The internet didn't obsess over this because they expected a winner. They embraced it because it brought people together through chaos. It didn't divide, it unified, in the most ridiculous way possible. Across TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube, people weren't just defending their nations. They were laughing, connecting, and finding common ground in their differences. It turns out that nothing bridges the Atlantic faster than a fictional fight between nations armed only with stereotypes and snack-fueled stamina. In fact, maybe this debate isn't about violence at all. Maybe it's about a new kind of global competition. Not your traditional Olympics, but something wilder. A cultural free-for-all where humor, identity, and national quirks are the main events. The Unhinged Games. Imagine it. A tournament where nations compete not with medals and flags, but with meme power, pub etiquette, and fast food endurance. The world might just tune in for that more than they would for synchronized swimming. And if we're being honest, America has the hype. They've got the size, the spectacle, the showmanship. But Britain has the timing, the wit, and that quiet sense of knowing something you don't. If this were a movie, the Americans would dominate the trailer. But the Brits might just steal the final scene. So maybe there's no real winner. Or maybe that's the point. Because in the end, the true victory goes to the internet, for taking a throwaway question and turning it into one of the most bizarrely unifying cultural showdowns of the decade.